One of the big storylines of this election so far has been how important immigration is as an issue to many Americans. But immigration isn't just one thing as an issue, and it doesn't just mean one thing to any particular American, let alone to different Americans or different groups of Americans. It means different things to different people, and it's usually simplified down to just working class concerns about having to compete for jobs with illegal immigrants. But there's a lot more to it, and now we've got some survey data to help break that down. So, why are people concerned about immigration? Let's bring up this chart and you're going to see the main reason. First of all, the single highest response is 29% of Americans who say they don't know or have no opinion, which implies that it might be a kind of shallow concern about immigration, I think it's safe to say. But beyond that, those who have a preference for why immigration is an important issue to them, it's that it hurts national security. That is almost 30% of all the respondents. And by the way, it is much larger of a response than weakens the economy. And typically, immigration is talked about in terms of economic insecurity and fears about effects on the job market. But it turns out that fears about our country being destroyed by immigrants are much more likely. Now, weakens American values. We can criticize the people who hold that as a position if we want to, and certainly the idea that America is a place where influxes of new culture are a bad thing rather than the standard operating procedure for our country throughout history seems a bit ridiculous to me. Increases crime, I would probably lump in with hurts national security as concerns over non-economic effects of immigrants. And you see, when you combine those together, almost twice as many Americans are concerned about security and crime than about the economy, which is definitely not the idea that you get if you simply listen to people stopped on the news, on the street, to say, hey, what's your biggest issue or what's most important to you? And certainly the voters who are flocking to Donald Trump, they keep saying it's about the jobs and making sure that Americans get the jobs first. When you actually talk to them, it doesn't turn out to be the case. Now, you might say, well, that's all Americans, John, so that doesn't really prove what you're saying. But it turns out that when you limit the sample to working class voters, defined as those without a college degree, national security at 24% still trumps the economy at 20% as a top concern about immigration, with crime again getting about 13%. So even if we're talking specifically about the sorts of people who, with immigration being one of their main issues, seem like prime Trump voters, concerns about security, national or personal, outweigh the economy significantly. And so I think it's extremely important that even on an issue like immigration, where many people think they understand what's going on, that we drill down a bit deeper. But there are other ways that you can drill down. And one of the ways that immigration isn't just one issue is that immigrants come from very different parts of the world. And it turns out, perhaps unsurprisingly, that Americans have strong opinions about that part of it as well. So we bring up this final chart, you'll see responses to the question, do you think the impact of immigrants from blank has been mostly positive or negative? And you see huge disparities between regions. So immigrants coming from Europe or from Asia, people are far more likely to say that they've had a mostly positive impact. Although even in those cases, 1 out of 4 or 5 Americans still believe it's been negative. And so yes, European immigration has not been very popular even for Americans. But if you go to Latin America and Africa, mostly negative outweighs mostly positive. And in the Middle East, it's not even a contest. There, fewer than 15% or 20% of Americans saying that Middle Eastern immigration has been a positive thing for America. The majority of Americans saying that it's been a negative. And so when we talk about immigration, and we especially talk about the way Trump has talked about immigration, the way his supporters have talked about immigration, if you bring up any sort of xenophobia based on race or religion, or imply that that could influence how people think about this issue, you're usually attacked as playing the race card unnecessarily. And yet when you ask Americans why they care about immigration, they make very clear that race, national origin, and conceivably religion are an important factor as well. So look, immigration, regardless of how you break it down, is an important, crucial issue for millions and millions of Americans. But its importance goes far beyond the stereotypical shallow view of working class Americans worried about losing their jobs. And to the politicians who are hoping to potentially appeal to those voters who care a lot about immigration and might currently be being taken in by Trump with his rhetoric on stopping illegal immigration, you can appeal to those voters. But if you're going to do it, first, you're going to have to dig quite a bit deeper into what it means to those Americans. And that's my final judgment.